And we've got an interesting story on what I like to call university waste. So you were a medicine student, I was a law student, so both of us benefit in some way from the whole university ecosystem, and I've obviously turned against them, Peter Thiel style. I'm not sure your view, we'll find that in a second. There was an interesting story. The current Victorian governor, which is a pretty big role, and former Monash University Chancellor Margaret Gardner has been criticised after it revealed the university paid $127,000 for a lavish farewell party at the National Gallery of Victoria. It's a pretty flash venue. It included a performance by Kate Sobrano. The move comes as the Tertiary Education Union claimed Monash students were sitting on the floor during lectures, and the university is being accused of wage theft by casual workers, and I think there's a Fair Work case going on now. Gardner was appointed Victoria Governor last year and happens to be married to one Glyn Davis, former Vice-Chancellor of Melbourne Uni. He was responsible for the Melbourne model, if you know, when they basically turned you to the... Funnily enough, if you look up Melbourne model, I'm not sure it still is the case, but if you type the Melbourne model in Wikipedia, it links to one of my articles I wrote criticising the Melbourne model back in like 2008. So
you're everywhere. You're inescapable.
Wikipedia. It was the only Wikipedia entrance I've got, I think.
He also became... I don't know what he does now. He's like a very senior bureaucrat.
He's a secretary of the Prime Minister Department.
He's
about as senior as he gets. So this is Melbourne's power. This is Australia's power couple in many ways. The $120,000 event was described as lavish and out of touch, with an attendee noting Kate Sobrano was one of Gardner's favourites, apparently, so she and the other artists played. There were lots of bigwigs there, like politicians. Not heaps of staff, though. At least not outside management. Your views on this?
So let me just say my conflict of interest first, which is...
Reformed?
I'm very close with Simon McKeon, who's the Chancellor of Monash University. So let me just get that out of the way.
And like the chairman, essentially.
It's the chairman.
And the vice chancellor's the CEO.
I literally had lunch with him a week ago.
He's a big guy. He's a big guy.
He was Australian of the Year 10, 12 years ago.
And
he's a fan
of
multiple
different
businesses. I said to you, I'm quite close with him. I cannot speak highly enough about him as a human being.
Yeah, very successful guy.
He gets a lot of, your mate Joe Aston laid into him because on the Rio board when the whole gorge happened, which Simon would... doesn't shy away from how bad that was, just to be super clear.
And ultimately, he was one person on that board, so you can't...
And so what I know is that the view of Margaret Gardner was extremely positive as a Vice-Chancellor, and she did it for almost a decade, something like that. So that's my preamble. My overarching emotion about this particular topic is I could not care less. Is it not indicative of the waste generally at universities? All right, so let me start arguing with you about universities now. Okay. Let's begin by saying there are some things going on in universities, particularly in the US, that are deeply problematic, and there is something globally in Western civilization where a lot of university life has been taken over by the far left. Yep. It's deeply problematic, and the core of what universities stand for has been diminished, which is the free and open debate. Yep. And so a lot of free debate now is anti-Western civilization, and pro-Western civilization debate is often stifled. It's much worse outside Australia than in Australia. So I acknowledge those problems, and I hate them as much as you hate them.
Yep.
I still think universities are really important. I think not only do they provide an education, but if we can get them back to what they're supposed to stand for, they're one of the cornerstones of Western civilization, which is rational thought and polite, sophisticated debate and a contest of ideas. So I love all of that. Can we get them back there? I think so. I think we can.
I think you're missing another problem. So there's clearly the woke issue, which is a problem.
Yeah.
I think what that links
to... That's a good summary of my last 2 minutes of conversation.
That's linked to is the waste problem, which is my problem. When I say waste, I mean... How much university's expensive now. Forget Ivy League, because Ivy League is ridiculously expensive. But even US generally, so you can spend in the US it's like $50,000 a year. But if you look at Australia, it's expensive as well. Like Australia university, if you're a foreign student, it's super expensive.
All right.
And if you're a local student, it's still expensive. Like your HEX debt is big. That's a real debt.
HEX is the greatest system to fund university education that exists on planet Earth.
I think it's good.
I've done a lot of research into this, and because the Greens had this typically dumb idea of let's pay off everyone's HEX debt, $42 billion, right?
Joe Biden.
Nobody's HEX debt should be paid
100%.
off. It's a great, very fair system.
Yeah. I'm not disagreeing with the HEX debt, but the problem with university...
Basically that Greens policy, just to stick the knife in deeper, it would be Australia's largest tax cut to the future wealthy.
The rich. That's the Greens are the party of the rich.
I hate them.
Not the party of the
poor,
they're the party of the rich. The party of the NIMBYs. But,
all right, we agree.
But if you look at the universities...
and this
127,000... It's just symbiotic of... So I've only met Margaret Gardner once.
Symptomatic.
symptomatic. It was so, and I was. She had this. Well, the university. It was in the city campus. I used to be on the Monash Uni Law Foundation. I used to go to meetings there a bit, but that wound up with actually Will Fowles, who had a tough run of late, but and a few other people. But we went to this, and it was this event for call inverted commas successful Monash University graduates. And to be honest, there weren't that many successful graduates. I was ironically one of the more successful people there, and I don't consider myself very successful. So
you are a published author.
Few, people of any great. There was one guy actually done quite well, and there was a few people who were just middling. Anyway, she had this. I couldn't tell if it was to try and raise money because I was never going to ask for money.
I'm trying to work out where this story is going.
I'm going to the stories. We got rock up there, and it was like a fine dining restaurant. Like there was waiters, butler service. And I'm actually sitting next to Margaret, and she was lovely. But I'm thinking, how much money is being wasted? This should be money being spent on education. It's being spent on me, on this fancy dinner, and these other dickheads. And why are we wasting all this money on? I can understand there's a point to try and rate, but no one asked us for cash. So there was just no point to it other than just a gathering of rich people spending other people's money. It just made no sense.
So I don't care about any of that. And so I tell
you
you
don't care about money being wasted?
Well, let me tell you something. So the minute a student union criticises something, I assume whatever the target is, the target is on the side of good. Because student unions have become so terrible in their ideology and their attitude to the world.
I'm not defending student
unions.
No,
I don't think they've always been
but
terrible.
The amount that universities pay for executives is insane. No, like there's too much bloated bureaucrisy there. It's like a state government.
In Australia, Australian vice-chancellors are very well paid by global standards.
There's hundreds of people who work in these organisations.
$127,000 for a party. So
that's egregious.
That's an expensive party.
This is not a This is government taxpayer money and student money.
You know,
they're public funded organisations.
So if I wanted to,
it's indefensible.
If I wanted to pick on things, well, it's not about defending. Should it have been $127,000 or $50,000 or $15, and we can go to go to a Hoyts and go to a little party room in the Hoyts. Okay, that's not what it's about. It's about saying, where does $127,000 sit in the grand scheme of things, and what is the underlying maybe culture that it signifies?
Yeah,
and in my experience with these universities, I don't think that there is largesse flying around everywhere.
I think you're wrong. I think 100%
that's not
wrong,
what I've seen.
100% wrong.
And I think
the fame of the clubs, these expensive clubs that the chancellor goes to, this vice chancellor goes to. There is billions of dollars of waste in these universities.
There's definitely not billions of dollars of
across
waste
all the Australian universities.
No, there's only billions of dollars of expenditure. There's not going to be billions of dollars of waste.
No, I think there's billions of dollars of waste.
I don't think so. And I think this thing is it's a farewell for a vice-chancellor who's been there for 9 years. If you say to me, should it have been $80,000 and not $120,000?
$1,000 would have done the trick.
No, I don't agree. I think there is, you could have started a bank 100 years ago in a small hut. And someone could come in and they do their deposits and withdrawals, but that's not what banks did. They built these big buildings with pillars out the front because they wanted to signify that your money was safe and this is a reputable institution. And I think that there should be a level of there should be a level of kind of magic and specialness around universities. And so I don't think it should have been a $1,000 affair.
Between your example and this, one's private and one's public.
The banks actually were not private originally.
Commonwealth Bank wasn't, but the rest were.
No, all the state banks weren't. And the point still stands. I don't think you want universities to feel like some backyard organisation.
Invest in education. Don't invest in parties.
Well, they do invest in education. Most of the money goes into education.
When I went to uni, I did commerce and law, and I remember you go to this commerce lecture, and there'd be 300 people in there. One lecturer getting paid a couple $100,000 a year. If you add up how much everybody's paying per lecture, you're paying $100,000 and paying the lecturer $1,000. Where's the 99K going? The buildings are built. Someone's siphoning off all this cash for expensive dinners with Kate Sobrano. That's where it's going. It's being pilfered away.
I couldn't
by
agree
these
more. I love your maths is impossible
to do.
It's
the absolute elite. This is the classic inverted commas elite is people who run these universities.
Listen, I'm on no university board, okay?
Yeah, and you fit in beautifully by the sound.
But let me tell you why it's impossible to argue. This is your maths. This is why I can't argue. You go to a lecture and it costs $100,000 for people to sit there and the lecturer gets paid $1,000. Now, I can't argue with any of those numbers because they're very round and I don't know where they've come from and I don't know what it costs and what people get paid. What I know is this. It seems to me that there's going to be a lot of expenses associated with the university that are going to vastly exceed a once in 9 years $127,000 party for a departing chancellor, a vice chancellor.
This is where the rot sets in. If you allow this, the rot goes. It's why that's why when we fly, we don't pay for business class or first class, because then you need to, if you're not frugal in one area, you're not frugal in any areas. You just say, oh, this guy Johnny went business class, so I can spend $100,000 on a dinner.
So I agree with that. I agree. If you're not, there are because you can't look at a whole organisation and see where it's spending money. So you need these kind of hallmark expenditures to make decisions on. I totally agree with you on that, and I think that there would be wasted money in universities, as there's wasted money in all organisations and in public organisations more than private organisations. But large enterprise businesses, they have as much wastage as a public company, a public corporation. Like if you look at a bank, a big bank,
I would think it's less bad than public.
I don't think so. There are lots of people in those organisations that
remember
more
Gail,
than they
Gail
need.
Kelly's farewell when she came as Cleopatra on the back of a horse or something?
Vaguely.
Yeah, or an elephant or something like that.
So I don't think this 127K is indicative of the way that Monash University
I had that small experience where you had butler service and fine dining, and I remember being disgusted.
Maybe they wanted money from you. You know, most
never asked.
But like that, maybe there's some process of getting money out of you.
No, they wanted money.
They don't ask you. You just feel obliged, and then somehow money falls out of your pockets. I mean, they're never going to be getting money out of you. But like, basically,
well, not the university. Other people will, but not the university.
That's what I mean. And so, what I think is this: the US is largely the private universities, because we don't have private universities in Australia in the way the US does. Like Bond is private, but that's about it really. These endowments really are what drive American private universities. You say they're very expensive, but I'll say to you the flip side is most people are not paying full fees. Lots of people aren't paying fees at all at places like Harvard and Ivy League colleges. And so I think that the Australian universities are trying to head down the endowment route somewhat, and they're probably clumsy at the moment because they're just getting started. But I don't mind the idea that private money subsidises public universities, provided they don't get to determine. Like, I don't like when foreign governments are subsidising it and they get to decide curriculum, but I'm supportive of that. And if this is part of a move towards getting some private money to fund public institutions, I'm quite supportive of that.
International students are essentially private money.
I know, they are private money.
And there's other private money funding Australian universities.
But there's no reason why Monash University should not have a $5 or $10 billion endowment. Lots of people that are very rich went to Monash University.
I think there's a real question on, and Scott Galloway talks about this a lot, was giving money to wealthy universities in the US, I'm talking about the US specifically, makes no sense. And Malcolm Gladwell's been great on this as well in Vision's history. Like the notion that a rich person gives money to a rich university so other rich kids can get educated, I find just the whole thing
Well,
bizarre.
Universities in the US are educating lots of non-rich kids, but I don't want to disagree with that point. I totally agree with it. The purpose of giving money to a big university is so the person that's giving it gets their name on a building. 100%. That's the purpose of it, right? So I totally agree, but Australia is completely different. Australia is almost entirely government funded, the universities plus international students, and I really have a big supporter of people that have made lots of money that have been to these universities, like setting up endowments to make the universities better.
Adam, why would you not give money to universities, not give money to refugee centres or whatever it is? I don't see the point of I think universities don't contribute all that much, and I don't think they contribute really anything to me. Like I found it a waste of time, and too many faculties in universities don't contribute. I don't think the arts faculty contributes. I think you certainly get stuff out of vocational stuff like medicine and engineering, but law maybe because you have to. But I think you could probably, everything I learned at law school, I could probably learn on the job.
Have you heard of this discipline called philosophy? It was quite popular 2,000 years ago, and it's still having a pretty significant impact. One of its children is called democracy, another is called capitalism, and so that comes out of the arts faculty. So once again, I could not disagree more. I think the liberal arts is fundamental to Western civilization. So a part of me thinks that everybody should do a liberal arts degree before they go and do a vocational degree.
I've got a feeling if you get a liberal arts degree now, you get far more education on why Hamas is good and less on why capitalism is good.
Well, that comes back to my original point, which is
that's what we've got. That's where we're at.
So don't worry about your 127K. Worry about changing that. That is what needs to be changed.
It's all interlinked.
I promise you the people at this $127,000 dinner, and they were not people that are out protesting in favour of Hamas.
But it's all, when you start wasting money on this, then you start hiring DI people, and it's all linked in the wastage. They're all different buckets of the same thing.
This is called the thin end of the wedge argument, and it's usually not true.